This is a modified Fender Mustang Midi game controller. I modified this controller as a sort of prototype for a MIDI guitar build I plan to work on in the future. I wanted to see if it would actually work and play the way I envisioned it would, that it would feel and play and perform smoothly, easily, and effectively like an actual instrument, and not feel gimmicky or like a toy. And now that it's finished, I can safely say that it absolutely does. It has been a complete joy to build and play, and in this video, I'm going to give a brief overview of its current functionality and talk a bit about some of the modifications I made to the original design. I'll take you through the testing phase, a rundown of the parts I used, and I'll talk a bit about some of the challenges that a guitar-style MIDI controller has and how I was able to overcome them with my setup. I'll also talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons of using a MIDI controller versus a regular guitar, and I'll discuss some of the stuff I'm going to work on in the future. For those who are unfamiliar, the original Fender Mustang Wii MIDI game controller looked like this. It had 6 strings that were like note repeat triggers for each string, and the neck had buttons that represented the notes of a fretboard. I didn't mess with the neck, so I won't get into that, but let's talk a bit about the strings. These work great for the Rock Band game, but for me, the MIDI functionality was a bit troublesome because hitting the strings would leave the notes I played on indefinitely. Also, if I wanted to implement any guitar intonations like mutes, harmonics, etc., I would have to reach over to one of my other MIDI controllers, which was kind of awkward and difficult to execute. That prompted me to start using my MIDI Fighter 3D simultaneously with the MIDI guitar. And for the most part, this worked, for recording at least. But after doing this for a few months, I had a sort of revelation. I thought, how awesome would it be if I could have all the buttons in one place, on one instrument? How awesome would it be if the buttons were built into the guitar? And well, the rest, as I say, is history. So for the guitar itself, I decided to go with a 10-button layout. I went with 10 buttons because given the size of the guitar, 10 buttons would fit nicely where the strings were originally. Also, I realized that most of the time I would, at most, usually only ever use 10 intonations at one time when playing or recording. And I just want to say, before I get into the buttons and how I laid out the intonations for each of them, I just want to preface the descriptions I'm about to give by saying that I'll be referring to any notes that are triggered upon the release of a button press as open triggers, and any notes that are triggered when pressed and held down, I'll be referring to those as closed triggers. So the intonations I decided to go with were open trigger power chord palm mutes, closed trigger power chord palm mutes, open trigger sustain notes, closed trigger sustain notes, chorus and delay, low pass filter, pinch harmonics, palm mutes, regular sustain, and power chords. These are the intonations that I use the most, so I decided to go with these, but I may change them in the future to suit the song I'm playing or recording. Maybe have a button be a pitch bend or phaser or something like that.